Hi everyone, this is a new channel with scary stories, with which you can relax to the sound of rain or fire. If my channel helps you, please support this video with a like and subscribe. And you can also write from what country you are watching me. Everyone enjoy watching. As usual, I was standing at the bus stop to go to school. It was terribly cold outside. People, wrapped in a sea of clothes and hiding their faces behind huge scarves, stood waiting for the bus. I was in the midst of this crowd when suddenly, from the opposite side of the road, I felt a palpable warmth and an odor of rot. I turned toward the bus stop, but saw nothing suspicious. Then that warm breeze came again. I looked around at the people standing next to me. They were shaking from the cold, and I felt unbearably hot. I must have looked like a fool unbuttoning my jacket in the cold. Turning around again, I suddenly noticed the girl. She was facing me, wearing a purple-colored sundress, all ragged. Her knees were shredded, and through her short, slicked-back hair I could see a mess of blood and meat. It wasn't a face, it was really a mess. I stood and watched. Some people say they can't move on such unexpected occasions, but in my case it was nothing like that. I could have turned away, I could have run, but I didn't want to do that. I looked at the girl waiting to see what would happen next. She was looking at me, and I could smell the stink of rot that almost turned me inside out, but I held on. She took a step, then another, and began to cross the road. My eye began to twitch. She was getting closer, and then I saw a car coming toward her. I had already started to reach out my hand and open my mouth to yell, "Stop!" The car hit her and sped away. It drove through her, and the girl disappeared as if she had never been there. And then I threw up, right on the woman standing next to me. I'll never forget the evil look in her eyes. I ran out of there and headed for my house. I could still smell the corpse odor in my nose. I ran into the entryway, climbed to the third floor, and opened the door of my apartment. Once inside, I slid down the wall and sat on the floor. What the hell was that thing? No one had seen it, just me. If I told anyone, they'd think I was crazy. I was sitting, looking at one point, and then I felt someone's light breath on my neck. I got up immediately, reassuring myself that it was self-induced. Going into the bedroom, I threw off my shoes and jacket and lay down on the bed. I fell asleep. When I opened my eyes, it was already 3 o'clock on the clock. I looked at my phone. There were 7 missed calls from my friend, my classmate. He and I rented an apartment together. He wasn't in the apartment now. He must have slept over at his girlfriend's place. There was a noise coming from the bathroom. I thought it was Oleg coming back, but when I left the room, I didn't see any light from under the bathroom door. And the sounds came more and more clearly, as if someone was pounding his fist into the wall. Trying not to panic and coming with a determined step to the bathroom door, I turned on the light, opened the door, and just collapsed on the floor. There she was. The same girl. She was facing the wall and banging her head against the wall. There were distinct blood stains on the wall. Her mess instead of her face looked even worse now than before. Standing up, I reached for the light switch, turned off the light, slowly crawled away from the bathroom and into the kitchen. There I stared into the darkness, and suddenly I saw her eyes gleam in the darkness. She was coming toward me. She came very close, leaned over, and her face was right in front of mine. I turned away and covered my mouth with my hand. Somehow I knew she wouldn't do anything to me. The fear slowly faded away, and I turned toward her. Lifting my hand, I fumbled for the light switch and turned on the light. She didn't disappear. I was surprised in ghost stories. They disappear when you turn on the light. She stood still, leaning toward me. Her face, as I said, was gruesome, and her body was like it was made of scraps of skin and flesh, with bones visible in places. I stared, staring into her eyes, and I was pierced with pity for her. She didn't look away. I reached out my hand to her. As I touched her, I realized that she was quite real. She was as material as I was. I took her by the shoulders, put my arm around her, and rested her head in my lap. She obediently lay there, not moving. I stroked her hair, dirty with blood, and fell asleep. I opened my eyes at the sound of the door slamming shut. My friend was back. As he walked into the kitchen, he dropped the grocery bag and rushed toward me. I was covered in blood, but it wasn't mine. I knew whose it was, but he didn't. My arms, face, legs, neck, everything was covered in blood. I had wisps of her hair on my hands. A trail of blood led from the bathroom to the kitchen to me. There was a blood stain on the bathroom wall from when she'd banged her forehead against it. Calling for me, stupid. I grinned sadly, and Oleg didn't understand what had happened. We went to that very stop, and I told him everything. He believed me. We stood, and I looked ahead, at that very stop. I was waiting for her to show up. We stood there most of the afternoon. It was getting dark, and Oleg, angry and hungry, wanted to carry me home almost in his arms, when a man appeared at the stop with a bunch of artificial flowers. He put them on the ground and said something. Oleg looked at him and twirled his finger at his temple, but I headed toward the man. Oleg tugged at my sleeve, but I threw his arm off. When I got to the man, he was standing with his head tilted, as if talking to someone invisible. I knew who he was talking to. At that moment I thought it was the girl's father, but as I found out a little later, it wasn't. I touched his shoulder. He turned around and tears glistened on his cheeks. He wiped them away quickly. Turns out today is exactly 2 months since that girl died. He was just a regular bus driver. He was driving home on a dark evening and didn't notice a girl crossing the road. The bus caught the back bumper of her sundress and dragged her along the asphalt for 300 meters. Then it stopped, but the girl's body already looked like a piece of meat. He was not drunk, did not leave the scene of the accident, but took her to the hospital. There he told in tears what he had done. Doctors with a gurney came running to the bus. The man opened the door, and there was no one inside. Not even a drop of blood. Twisting his finger at his temple, the doctors advised him to drink less. The depressed driver drove home. At exactly 3 a.m., he heard banging in the bathroom. He went into the bathroom and saw what I saw. I listened to the driver's story and didn't understand anything. Who was this girl? Why, when she was hit by a car at the bus stop, did she disappear like a ghost? And why was I able to touch her in my apartment like a living person? We walked home with Oleg. I was thinking, and he just walked beside me. Both of us were silent all the way home. A month later I came to the bus stop with flowers, put them on the asphalt, and stood there for a long time hoping to see that girl again. I stood there all night. It was getting light, but she wasn't there. She never showed up. I wondered why the driver didn't come with flowers today, too. I was beginning to forget the story, but one evening the doorbell rang when I wasn't expecting anyone. Glancing at the calendar, I suddenly remembered that today was exactly 4 months since the accident on the road. I walked toward the door, but stopped when I heard a knock on the bathroom door. Smiling, I headed toward the bathroom and opened the door. There was my friend hanging in a noose. His legs were cramping against the wall. I pulled him down as fast as I could, but it was too late. I hugged him in horror, just as I had hugged her then. What had she done to him? After that terrible day, I lived for a month. I didn't take flowers to her anymore, but to my friend. After a month, sitting alone in my apartment, I was afraid to hear that knocking in the bathroom again. I was afraid she'd come for me. She took the driver, that's why he didn't come with flowers. She killed him. And she killed my friend. The time was approaching 0300 at night. My heart was beating faster. I looked at my watch. 2:59. The minute had been an eternity. There was that knock again. She's here. I didn't go to the bathroom. Lying on the bed, staring at the ceiling. 3:05. The sound got louder and louder, but after 15 minutes it stopped abruptly. Then I heard a scream. She was screaming, "Why won't you come to me? Take me to you. Hold me." I covered my ears, unable to stand it. The bathroom door opened quietly. I heard the slow footsteps of bare, wet feet. She was walking towards me. I was numb with fear now. I really couldn't move. She appeared in the doorway. Blood dripped from her forehead onto the floor. She had hit the wall so hard that she had smashed her forehead all the way to her skull. The bathroom floor must have gotten a lot of blood on it, and she had stood barefoot in that puddle, and was now walking toward me, leaving red footprints. I closed my eyes so I couldn't see her. She sat down on the bed, lay down, put her arms around me. She was breathing directly into the back of my neck, and her arm went around me. I looked at her arm, rotted almost to the bone. I felt sick. It smelled dead. Fresh somehow, like she hadn't died 5 months ago. But just today that damn driver had dragged her across the pavement. She clutched me tightly, not wanting to let go of my rotten hands. I knew it wasn't her fault she was half alive and half already out there. It was my own fault that she was coming to me. But it's not like she's killing me, like she killed the driver or Oleg, she just needs someone around. I turned to her and wanted to hug her, but she was gone. I didn't dare to get up for a long time. In the morning, I found the bloody footprints of little feet leading from the bathroom on the floor. There I was greeted by a pool of blood that had almost dried up. I moved out of the apartment without telling my landlords about the story. I never brought flowers to that stop again. But that was the day Oleg died, and I have to go to the cemetery with flowers for him. And sometimes, when I stand over his grave, I feel how it embraces me from behind with its bloody arms, how it breathes into my back at the bus stop with its grave breath, how a breeze blowing on this very day brings the smell of fresh dead meat. Story number 2, Let Me In. One day, when I was alone at home, I decided to invite my girlfriend over for the night. I called her and arranged for her to come over to my place. Half an hour later I heard a knock on the door, and my friend's voice opened up. I'm freezing. The voice was shaking and I immediately realized that it was Nastia, as she had long refused to come to me because of the cold outside. I told her to wait, my hands were wet. In response, the voice from behind the door repeated the same, I'm cold, and each time louder and louder. I decided that she was mocking me and walked slowly to the door. Suddenly I get a call from the same friend. I pick up the phone with my staff and say I'm on my way. But the friend from the phone asks where I'm going and apologizes for not coming. At this time I was already standing at the front door and almost opened it. I told the fool that I would call her back. She wouldn't believe me anyway and laughed at me. I was left alone with myself and the voice of my friend from behind the door. At that time I really wanted to look through the peephole, but I didn't dare, and the voice of this creature kept repeating I'm freezing. And it almost turned into an angry scream. When I looked through the peephole, what I saw there was simply impossible to describe. That creature just physically cannot represent the voice of my friend. I jumped away from the door and pressed myself against the wall. Suddenly at some point it went silent. There were no sounds for about a minute, maybe a little less. I gradually began to calm myself down, as there was a slightly audible scraping on the door. This sound was amplified by my weak psyche and was echoed in my head with a scream. I was in such a panic that I could not even scream. My throat was numb. I almost fainted. I felt sick. I fell down and pressed myself against the wall, while from behind the door came a rough voice, more appropriate to this creature. I'm cold. Let me in. The screeching sound turned to a banging sound, so much so that I thought it was going to break the door down. I sat against the wall, clinging to it as a lifeline, and cried quietly. Everything stopped in an instant. The door stopped shaking under his banging, and his voice stopped too. I sat against the wall for what seemed like a very long time, crying occasionally. Then I remembered about the phone, because it was in my hand all the time, and saw one empty message from a hidden number. I looked at the blank screen and millions of thoughts went through my head. A friend called, and I flinched, but I picked up the phone. And it turned out that I could still talk. Nastia asked me how I was doing and started to tell me something. Are you listening to me? She asked in an indignant voice. Naturally, I wasn't listening to her at the moment. I asked her to come to me and cried quietly into the phone. She calmed me down and said she would be right there. We talked to her the whole way she was coming to me, and I calmed down a bit, and was even able to stand up. She and I said goodbye on the phone as she came into my driveway. A minute later I heard the doorbell ring. Thank goodness, not a knock. I ran to the door to throw myself on her shoulder, and finally burst into tears. But when I opened the door, behind her stood that very creature holding my dead friend in his arms. Shadows on the Walls, Chapter 1. A New Beginning. Alex and Anna Belov, a young couple, decided to start a new life in a quiet town in the southern part of Russia. They found a house that seemed perfect for them and their 3-year-old daughter, Nastia. It was an old 2-story cottage with a crooked fence and an overgrown garden, but had a charming atmosphere that promised peace and comfort. The house had been abandoned for several years, but the price was low, and the family decided that they could renovate it and make it their cozy nest. As soon as the Belovs moved in, they began to notice some oddities. At first, it was minor things, the light creaking of floorboards, unexpected drafts, and ancient noises coming from the walls. They blamed it on the age of the house. Nastia, however, sensed something strange right away. She constantly watched the walls as if she saw something her parents couldn't. "Someone is there," she would say whenever her parents asked why she didn't want to play in her room. Alex and Anna tried to dismiss it as childish imagination, but soon the events started to take a more sinister turn. Chapter 2: The Appearance of Shadows. One rainy evening, while the family was sitting in the living room, Alex noticed strange shadows dancing across the walls as if their source was not the lamp's light but something else. It was more like figures moving according to their own rules. "Do you see that?" he asked Anna, pointing at the shadows. Anna frowned and nodded. "Yes, strange. Maybe it's the reflection of the trees outside?" But when Alex looked out the window, he saw only the deserted street and the rain beating against the glass. There were no trees nearby. The next night, the situation worsened. The shadows became more distinct and real. They appeared in every room and moved slowly as if searching for something. Nastia cried, pointing at one of the shadows. "Mommy, it's scary! He's looking at me!" Anna hugged her daughter, trying to calm her. "It's just a play of light, sweetheart. Nothing to be afraid of." But deep down, she felt that something was wrong. She couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were more than just an illusion. Chapter 3: The History of the House. Alex decided to investigate the history of the house, hoping to find an explanation for the strange phenomena. He went to the local library and found archival records about the house. An old librarian, noticing his interest, told him that the house once belonged to the Zhukov family, who mysteriously disappeared over 50 years ago. The house was found empty, with strange markings on the walls. "They say the Zhukovs practice dark magic," the librarian said, lowering her voice. "People believe their souls still wander the house, trapped by their own spells." A chill ran down Alex's spine. He knew legends rarely held any truth, but something in the librarian's voice made him uneasy. When he returned home, he found Anna and Nastia terrified. The shadows were becoming more aggressive. They could move objects and emit eerie whispers only heard in the silence of the night. Chapter 4: The Threat of Shadows. The next night, things reached a critical point. The shadows not only danced on the walls but also took on the form of people with distinct faces that looked incredibly menacing. Alex and Anna woke in the middle of the night to Nastia's screams. When they rushed into her room, they found the girl standing in the center, surrounded by dancing shadows. Her eyes were closed, and her lips were whispering words in an unknown language. Anna panicked and tried to approach her daughter, but an invisible force held her back. Alex, mustering all his courage, managed to break through to Nastia and hugged her, begging for everything to stop. Nastia finally opened her eyes, and the shadows dissolved, leaving only a grim atmosphere in the room. The girl was in shock, her lips trembling, and her eyes filled with tears. "They want to take me," she said quietly. The Belovs realized that this could not continue. They decided to seek help from a local priest, hoping he could exorcise the evil from their home. Chapter 5: The Last Chance. Father Ivan, a priest known for his experience in exorcising evil spirits, agreed to help. He visited the house and, after walking through it, stated that he felt a strong presence of evil. "These shadows are not mere illusions," he said. "They are restless souls seeking an exit from this world. They are bound to this place because of what happened here." He proposed to perform a cleansing ritual that would sever the shadows' connection to the house and set them free. The following morning, when the first rays of the sun began to break through the clouds, Father Ivan began the ritual. He sprinkled holy water on the walls and chanted prayers, his voice echoing like a song bouncing off the walls. The shadows began to gather, as if resisting expulsion. They became more aggressive, lunging at the priest but unable to cross the line of light surrounding him. The process was long and exhausting. Alex and Anna stood by, holding Nastia, who trembled with fear. Finally, after an hour of struggle, the priest completed the ritual, and the shadows began to vanish, dissolving in the morning light. "It's over," Father Ivan said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Your house is now cleansed. But never forget, evil always seeks ways to return." The Belovs thanked the priest for his help, full of hope that their lives would finally return to normal. Chapter 6: A New Dawn. Months passed, and the Belovs' lives gradually returned to normal. The shadows no longer haunted them, and the house was filled with light and joy. Nastia started playing in her room again, no longer afraid of the strange visitors. Anna tended to the garden, which had become a true masterpiece, and Alex finally felt their home was safe. One evening, sitting on the porch, Alex and Anna discussed future plans when Nastia came out, holding something in her hands. "Look what I found," she said, showing them an old, worn-out doll she had found in the basement. Anna smiled, but a shadow of worry flickered in Alex's eyes. However, he quickly dismissed the dark thoughts, deciding their trials were over. Yet, when night enveloped the house, Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He rose to check the windows and noticed a faint shadow flickering across the wall. But this time, it was just a play of light, or so he hoped. He knew there would always be something special, not entirely understandable, in their house but no longer threatening. Epilogue: the Bellovs remained in that house forever, finding peace and happiness. They never forgot what had happened but learned to live with a past that was no longer frightening. And although the shadows were gone, they left their mark on their lives, teaching the family to cherish what they had and be ready for anything life might bring. Chapter 1: A New Home. The Smirnov family, Alexei, his wife Anna, and their son Sergei, had always dreamed of owning a home. Finally, they managed to purchase an old mansion on the outskirts of a small village. The house was large and beautiful but in need of renovation, which didn't scare them. They were filled with enthusiasm and a desire to make this house their dream home. From the moment they moved in, they began to feel a strange atmosphere in the house. The air was thick and heavy, and an inexplicable feeling of unease seemed to permeate every room. Alexei chalked it up to the house being old, but Anna and Sergei felt that something was off. The first night in the house was uneventful, but the following days brought peculiar occurrences. Odd noises could be heard coming from the attic, scratching, shuffling, and what sounded like whispers. Sergei, who was only 12 years old, was the first to voice his fears. "Dad, I think there's something up there," he said one evening as the family sat at dinner. Alexei smiled, trying to reassure his son. "It's just an old house, Sergei. Old houses make noises. Probably just some rodents." But Anna wasn't convinced. She noticed that her husband had started to act differently. He was more irritable, and his sleep was disturbed by nightmares. Even Sergei, usually a lively and happy child, had become withdrawn and anxious. Chapter 2: The Discovery. One day, Anna decided to clean out the attic. As she climbed the creaky stairs leading up to it, the air seemed to grow colder. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she pushed the feeling of dread aside. When she reached the top, she was met with an overwhelming sense of discomfort. The attic was filled with old furniture, dusty boxes, and cobwebs hanging from the rafters. But what caught her attention was a large, ominous-looking trunk in the far corner of the room. Curiosity piqued. Anna approached the trunk, noticing strange symbols carved into its wooden surface. As she opened it, she was hit by an overpowering stench that made her gag. Inside, she found odd trinkets, strange artifacts, and a book bound in what appeared to be leather. Its pages were filled with cryptic writings and illustrations that made her skin crawl. Anna hurriedly closed the trunk, feeling a deep sense of unease. She knew she had to tell Alexei about her discovery, but a voice in her head whispered that it was best to leave the trunk untouched. That night, the noises from the attic grew louder. Alexei decided it was time to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, he made his way upstairs, determined to put an end to the disturbances. As he entered the attic, the beam of his flashlight caught something moving in the shadows. His heart skipped a beat. It was then that he saw them, the glowing eyes staring at him from the darkness. Panicking, Alexei backed away, stumbling over a box and dropping his flashlight. In the pitch black, he heard the unmistakable sound of something approaching him, a low, guttural growl that made his blood run cold. He managed to scramble to his feet and make it back downstairs, his mind racing with fear. "Anna, we have to leave," he said, his voice trembling. "There's something evil up there." Chapter 3: The Unveiling. Despite Alexei's warnings, the family stayed in the house. They were determined to overcome whatever was haunting them. But things only worsened. The disturbances grew more frequent and intense. Objects moved on their own, strange shadows crept along the walls, and whispers echoed through the halls. Sergei, terrified by the events, often ran to his parents' room in the middle of the night, claiming that something was watching him from the attic. His fears only added to the growing tension within the family. Desperate to find answers, Alexei decided to research the history of their home. He discovered that the previous owner, an eccentric man named Ivan Petrov, was rumored to have been a practitioner of dark magic. The villagers whispered about strange rituals and disappearances linked to the house. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Alexei reached out to an expert in the occult, a woman named Elena, who had a reputation for dealing with supernatural entities. She agreed to visit the house and assess the situation. When Elena arrived, she immediately sensed a malevolent presence within the home. "There is something dark and ancient here," she said, her voice grave. "It feeds on fear and suffering. We must find a way to banish it." Elena conducted a ritual to identify the source of the evil. As she chanted, the house seemed to come alive. The walls trembled, and a cacophony of unsettling noises erupted from the attic. Suddenly, the attic door slammed open, and a chilling wind swept through the house. The temperature dropped drastically, and a figure materialized at the top of the stairs, a shadowy being with eyes that burned like embers. It was the devil that had been lurking in the attic all along. Chapter 4: The Struggle. The entity descended the stairs, its presence filling the room with an overwhelming sense of dread. Elena continued her incantation, but the devil was relentless, advancing toward the family with malevolent intent. Alexei, Anna, and Sergei huddled together, their fear palpable. The creature reached out with clawed hands, its touch icy and suffocating. In that moment, Sergei screamed, breaking the entity's focus. Using the opportunity, Elena hurled a vial of holy water at the devil. The creature recoiled with a screech, its form dissolving into smoke. But the battle was far from over. The house shook violently as the devil fought against the ritual's binding. Elena urged the family to join hands, forming a circle of protection. They chanted alongside her, their voices trembling but resolute. The air crackled with energy as the entity struggled against the supernatural forces that sought to banish it. With a final, earth-shattering roar, the devil was forced back into the attic, the door slamming shut with a resounding thud. Elena collapsed, exhausted from the ordeal, but a sense of victory hung in the air. The malevolent presence had been subdued, at least for the time being. Chapter 5: The Aftermath. In the days that followed, the house grew silent. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the Smirnovs felt a newfound sense of peace. Alexei and Anna worked tirelessly to cleanse their home of any lingering darkness, ensuring that the evil would not return. Elena advised them to seal the attic and never disturb its contents. "The entity may be dormant, but it is not gone," she warned. "Do not give it a reason to awaken." Taking her words to heart, the family made a pact to leave the attic untouched, focusing instead on creating a safe and happy environment for themselves. Sergei gradually recovered from the trauma, though the memories of the ordeal lingered. He became more resilient and courageous, determined to protect his family at any cost. As the years passed, the Smirnovs thrived in their home. They learned to live with the knowledge that the devil in the attic was a constant, albeit silent, resident. The shadows that had once haunted them became a distant memory, overshadowed by the love and unity they shared. Epilogue. A warning: though the devil remained confined to the attic, the villagers whispered about the Smirnovs' haunted house. Some claimed they saw flickering lights in the attic windows at night, while others spoke of strange noises echoing through the forest surrounding the home. The Smirnovs paid little heed to these rumors, knowing that they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. Yet, deep down, they understood that the battle with the entity was never truly over. Every so often, when the wind howled and shadows danced in the corners of their vision, they were reminded of the malevolent force lurking above. They knew that they must remain vigilant, for the devil in the attic was always watching, waiting for a chance to break free. The Eyes That Watch. Chapter 1: The Strange Gift. It was a cold November morning when Victor received the peculiar gift that would change everything. It arrived in a small, nondescript package, with no return address or name of the sender. Victor assumed it was another early birthday present, as he often received packages from friends and family around this time of year. He tore open the brown paper and found a small, intricately carved wooden box. Inside was an old, ornate pocket mirror. The back was engraved with a series of swirling patterns and a single inscription: "To see beyond the veil." Victor examined the mirror curiously. It was undoubtedly a beautiful antique, though something about it seemed odd. When he held it up to his face, the reflection seemed sharper, more vivid than any mirror he had ever looked into before. It was as if he could see every detail, every pore, and every line on his face in stark clarity. For the next few days, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that the mirror was more than it seemed. Every time he looked into it, he felt an unexplainable sense of unease, as though he was being watched from within the glass. Then, one night, everything changed. Chapter 2. The First Glimpse. Victor awoke suddenly, heart pounding in the dead of night. He wasn't sure what had woken him, but as he lay in bed trying to calm his racing thoughts, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He turned his head toward the mirror on his dresser. At first, he thought he was still dreaming. The room was dimly lit by the streetlight filtering through the curtains, and in the reflection, he could make out his own sleeping form. But there was something else. In the darkened corners of the mirror's reflection, Victor saw eyes, dozens of them. They were small, glowing orbs, peering out from the shadows, watching him with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. He bolted upright, fumbling for the lamp on his nightstand. Light flooded the room, banishing the shadows. When he looked back at the mirror, the eyes were gone. Victor laughed nervously, convincing himself it was nothing more than a figment of his imagination, a trick of the light. Yet deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that what he saw was real. Chapter 3. The Presence. The next day at work, Victor couldn't focus. The events of the previous night haunted him, lingering at the edge of his thoughts. He was irritable and distracted, glancing nervously at reflective surfaces as though expecting to see the eyes again. His colleagues noticed his unusual behavior and asked if everything was all right. He brushed off their concerns with a forced smile, but he could sense their growing unease around him. As the day dragged on, Victor's paranoia deepened. Every reflective surface seemed to hold a secret, watching him with unseen eyes. The office windows, computer screens, even the polished marble floors in the lobby, all seemed to hide something just beyond his sight. When he finally returned home, Victor felt exhausted, both physically and mentally. He collapsed onto his couch, rubbing his temples in a futile attempt to dispel the unease clinging to him. But as night fell, the sense of being watched returned, stronger than ever. Every shadow seemed to move, every corner of the room held potential eyes, lurking just out of sight. It wasn't until he glanced at the pocket mirror that he truly understood the depth of his predicament. This time, the eyes weren't just watching from the corners. They were right there, on the surface of the mirror itself. Victor stared, transfixed, as dozens of small, glistening eyes blinked back at him. They seemed alive, shifting and turning as if studying him intently. Panic surged through him, and he dropped the mirror, hearing it clatter against the hardwood floor. He backed away, his mind racing with disbelief and fear. He needed answers, something, anything to explain what was happening. Chapter 4. The History of the Mirror. Desperate for answers, Victor spent the next day researching the origins of the mirror. He scoured the internet, searching for any clue that could explain the bizarre occurrences. After hours of fruitless searching, he stumbled upon an obscure forum dedicated to the paranormal. One thread caught his attention, a discussion about cursed objects and the malevolent spirits trapped within them. Among the anecdotes and theories, Victor found a post describing a mirror eerily similar to his own. The user claimed that it was crafted in the late 1800s by a reclusive occultist named Edgar Carver, who was rumored to have practiced dark magic. According to the legend, Carver used the mirror to trap the souls of those he wronged, binding them to watch from within the glass for eternity. It was said that anyone who possessed the mirror would be subjected to the torment of the trapped spirits, their sanity slowly eroded by the constant, unblinking gaze of the damned. Victor felt a chill run down his spine as he read the post. It sounded like something out of a horror movie, yet he couldn't deny the eerie similarities to his own experiences. He reached out to the forum user, hoping they might have more information or advice. To his surprise, the user responded quickly, offering a dire warning. "Do not engage with the mirror," they wrote. "It feeds on your fear. If you can't destroy it, find a way to seal it away. Do not let it claim you." Chapter 5. The Descent into Madness. Despite the warning, Victor found himself drawn to the mirror. The eyes seemed to beckon him, whispering secrets that only he could hear. He tried to resist, but the pull was too strong. Over the following weeks, Victor's life unraveled. The eyes were everywhere now, not just in the mirror but in every reflective surface he encountered. Windows, water, metal, each one bore witness to his every move, watching with a silent, oppressive presence. His co-workers noticed his erratic behavior, and soon he was let go from his job. Friends stopped calling, and even his family distanced themselves, concerned by his deteriorating mental state. Alone in his apartment, Victor succumbed to the whispers. They spoke of dark things, promises of power, knowledge beyond comprehension, and a release from the torment he endured. The eyes began to show him visions, glimpses of a world beyond the veil of reality. He saw shadowy figures moving in the periphery of his vision, darting between dimensions just out of reach. Victor became obsessed, convinced that the mirror held the key to understanding the hidden truths of the universe. He spent hours staring into its depths, losing himself in the swirling patterns and the endless eyes. Sleep became a distant memory, and with each passing day, the line between reality and illusion blurred further. The world outside his apartment faded into insignificance as the mirror consumed his thoughts. Chapter 6. Confrontation. Realizing he was spiraling into madness, Victor resolved to end the nightmare. He couldn't destroy the mirror. It seemed impervious to any physical harm, but he could try to seal it away. He devised a plan, gathering materials to encase the mirror in a lead-lined box. He would bury it deep in the earth, far from any living soul, in the hope that its influence would be contained. On the night of the new moon, Victor prepared to execute his plan. He placed the mirror in the box, avoiding its gaze as best he could. But as he moved to close the lid, the eyes seemed to shift, taking on a new form. Among the countless smaller eyes, two larger ones emerged, their gaze filled with an intelligence and malice that sent a shiver down Victor's spine. They bore into him, speaking directly to his mind. "You cannot escape," a voice whispered, echoing in his thoughts. "You belong to us now." Panic surged through Victor, and in that moment of desperation, he did the only thing he could think of. He smashed the mirror against the floor, shattering it into countless shards. For a brief moment, silence reigned. Then, the air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. The shards of glass quivered and began to rise, floating in the air around him. The room darkened as the eyes emerged once more, now freed from their confines. They filled the space, watching from every angle, a sea of malevolent gazes that bore into his very soul. Victor screamed, his mind unraveling under the weight of their collective stare. The walls closed in, and reality itself seemed to fracture, pulling him into a void beyond comprehension. Chapter 7. The Aftermath. When Victor awoke, he found himself lying on the floor of his apartment. The room was silent, the mirror shards scattered around him like fallen stars. The eyes were gone, their presence vanished as though they had never existed. The oppressive weight that had suffocated him for weeks had lifted, leaving him feeling hollow and empty. In the days that followed, Victor tried to piece together what had happened. He spoke to no one of his ordeal, fearing that no one would believe him, or worse, that the eyes might return if he spoke their name. He left the apartment, abandoning the city in search of solitude and a fresh start. But the memory of the eyes lingered, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil of perception. Victor never fully recovered from his encounter with the mirror. He lived in constant vigilance, wary of reflective surfaces and the secrets they might hide. Though the eyes no longer haunted him, their legacy remained, a scar on his psyche that could never be erased. The Wardrobe. Chapter 1. The new house. The old Victorian house stood at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, shrouded in the shadows of tall, ancient trees. Its once vibrant exterior had faded over the years, but to Emma, it looked like something out of a fairy tale. She and her parents had moved there in late autumn, hoping for a fresh start after her father accepted a new job in the small town of Oak Hollow. Emma was 10 years old, full of curiosity and imagination. She had always loved exploring and adventure, and the sprawling house with its creaking floors and dusty corners offered her plenty of both. The day they moved in, Emma explored each room with the excitement only a child could muster. The kitchen was spacious and inviting, the living room warm and cozy. But it was the attic bedroom that captured her attention the most. It was to be her new room, and it held a peculiar charm that made her feel special. The attic room had slanted ceilings and a round window that offered a view of the overgrown garden. But it was the large, ornate wardrobe standing against the far wall that intrigued Emma. Its dark wood was intricately carved with swirling patterns and strange, abstract shapes. The wardrobe seemed like something out of a fairy tale, something that might lead to another world. Emma loved the idea of having her own secret place, a realm beyond the confines of everyday life. She imagined herself as a brave heroine, fighting dragons and exploring enchanted forests. Little did she know that the wardrobe held secrets far more sinister than anything she could dream of. Chapter 2: The Whispering. Emma's first night in the new house was uneventful. Exhausted from the move, she fell asleep as soon as her head hit the pillow. But it was on the second night that things began to change. She was lying in bed, half asleep, when she heard a soft whispering sound. At first, she thought it was the wind rustling through the trees outside. But as she listened closer, she realized the sound was coming from inside her room. Emma sat up, her eyes scanning the dimly lit space. Her gaze settled on the wardrobe, which stood silently in the corner, its presence both ominous and alluring. The whispers seemed to emanate from within the wardrobe itself. They were faint, almost like the rustling of fabric, or the gentle sighs of someone sleeping. Emma's heart raced with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Gathering her courage, she climbed out of bed and approached the wardrobe. She reached out, hesitating for a moment before touching the cool, polished wood. The whispers stopped instantly, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to fill the room. Emma backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. She crawled back into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin, and tried to convince herself it was nothing more than her imagination. But sleep did not come easily that night, and the darkness seemed to stretch on forever. Chapter 3: The Shadows. In the days that followed, Emma tried to ignore the wardrobe. She busied herself with exploring the house, playing in the garden, and making friends with the neighborhood kids. But the whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent with each passing night. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across her room, Emma caught a glimpse of something that made her blood run cold. As she sat at her desk, drawing pictures of her imaginary adventures, she noticed a shadow flicker across the wall. It was subtle at first, just a faint outline that seemed to shift and waver in the fading light. But as Emma watched, the shadow took on a more defined shape. Resembling a tall, slender figure, the shadow moved with a strange, unnatural grace, as though it were dancing to a melody only it could hear. Emma felt a chill run down her spine, and she turned to look at the wardrobe. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for her to see the darkness within. The whispers had returned, louder now, and she could almost make out words in their insistent murmur. Emma's instincts screamed at her to run, to get as far away from the wardrobe as possible. But her curiosity was stronger, and she found herself drawn to the mysterious shadows. She approached the wardrobe cautiously, her heart thundering in her chest. As she reached for the handle, the whispers grew louder, almost like voices overlapping each other in a cacophony of sound. With a trembling hand, Emma pulled the wardrobe door open. Chapter 4: The Other Side. Inside, the wardrobe appeared empty, save for a few old hangers dangling from the rail. But the darkness seemed to pulse with a life of its own, an inky void that swallowed the dim light of the room. Emma peered inside, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the shadows shift and writhe like living things. She took a hesitant step forward, her foot brushing against something on the floor. It was a small, dusty book. Emma picked it up, wiping the grime from its cover to reveal an ornate title, The Chronicles of the Wardrobe. As she flipped through the pages, Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. The book was filled with illustrations and stories about the wardrobe. Tales of the dark entities that dwelled within and the children who had disappeared after venturing inside. One story, in particular, caught her attention, a legend about a realm beyond the wardrobe, a world of shadows and whispers where lost souls wandered forever. It spoke of a malevolent force that lured the curious and the brave, trapping them in a world of endless night. Emma felt a shiver run through her as she realized the stories weren't just fairy tales. They were warnings. As she closed the book, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The shadows in the wardrobe seemed to beckon her, inviting her to step through the veil and into the darkness beyond. Emma hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. The world beyond the wardrobe was unknown, its secrets hidden from the eyes of those who dared to look. But Emma was nothing if not brave. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead, and stepped into the darkness. Chapter 5: The Shadow Realm. As Emma crossed the threshold, she felt a strange sensation wash over her, like stepping into cold water. The air around her was heavy and oppressive, filled with a palpable sense of unease. The wardrobe's interior expanded impossibly, stretching into a vast landscape of shadows and mist. The ground beneath her feet was soft and yielding, like walking on clouds. The whispering voices surrounded her, echoing in the stillness like a haunting lullaby. Emma felt a tug at the edges of her mind, as though the shadows were trying to pull her deeper into their embrace. She walked cautiously, her footsteps echoing in the void. The world around her seemed to shift and change, shapes and forms appearing and disappearing in the corner of her vision. Emma wasn't alone. Figures moved in the distance, wraith-like silhouettes that glided silently through the shadows. They watched her with hollow eyes, their presence both ominous and sorrowful. As she wandered through the shadow realm, Emma realized the stories were true. The wardrobe was a gateway, a portal to a world where the lost and forgotten lingered, trapped between the realms of the living and the dead. The whispers guided her, leading her through the twisting paths of the shadow realm. Emma followed, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, determined to uncover the secrets of the wardrobe. Chapter 6. The Guardian of Shadows. Deeper into the shadow realm, Emma came upon a clearing bathed in an eerie, silvery light. In the center stood a towering figure, cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. The Guardian of Shadows. The whispers grew silent as the Guardian regarded Emma with a piercing gaze, its presence radiating an ancient power that chilled her to the bone. "You are brave to come here, child," the Guardian spoke, its voice a deep, resonant echo that filled the clearing. "Few dare to venture into the realm of shadows." Emma swallowed her fear, standing tall before the imposing figure. "I want to understand," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. "Why are you here? What do you want?" The Guardian's eyes gleamed with amusement. "We are the Watchers of the Night, the guardians of secrets hidden from the eyes of the living. We seek nothing but to exist, to observe the world of light from our realm of shadows." Emma's gaze was unwavering. "And the children? What happens to them?" The Guardian's expression shifted, a shadow of sadness passing over its features. "They become part of the shadow, their spirits lingering in our world. Some by choice, others by fate." Emma felt a surge of determination. "I don't want to stay here. I want to go home." The Guardian regarded her with a thoughtful silence. "You possess a rare courage, child. A will strong enough to defy the pull of the shadows." With a sweeping gesture, the Guardian created a path of light leading back to the wardrobe, the way home illuminated by the glow of 1,000 tiny stars. "Follow the path, and you shall return to the world of the living," the Guardian said, its voice both a command and a promise. "But know this, once you leave, the shadows will always be with you, watching and waiting." Emma nodded, her heart filled with a mixture of relief and trepidation. She turned away from the Guardian, stepping onto the path of light that led back to the world she knew. Chapter 7. The Return. Emma emerged from the wardrobe, her heart pounding with the realization of what she had experienced. The shadows of the realm lingered at the edges of her vision, their whispers fading into silence. The room was as she had left it, bathed in the soft glow of morning light. Emma looked around, half expecting the shadows to reach out and pull her back into their embrace. The wardrobe stood silently, its door closed, and its secrets hidden once more. Emma knew the shadows would always be a part of her, their whispers a reminder of the world beyond the veil. But she was no longer afraid. She had faced the darkness and returned stronger, her spirit unbroken by the shadows that had sought to claim her. Emma lived her life with the knowledge of the shadow realm, carrying the memory of her journey as both a warning and a promise. She knew the shadows would always watch, but she was unafraid. For she was Emma, the girl who had walked through the wardrobe and returned, her courage and will undiminished by the darkness that dwelled beyond the veil. Epilogue. The legacy of the wardrobe. Years passed, and Emma grew into a woman of remarkable strength and wisdom. She never forgot the shadow realm, its whispers echoing in the corners of her mind like a distant memory. The wardrobe remained in the attic room, a silent sentinel that watched over her life. Emma never spoke of her journey, keeping the secrets of the shadows close to her heart. But she knew the wardrobe was more than a piece of furniture. It was a gateway to a world of darkness and mystery, a place where shadows and whispers dwelled beyond the reach of light. And though she had returned to the world of the living, Emma understood the truth. The shadows would always be with her, watching and waiting for the day she would return to the realm beyond the veil. But she was no longer afraid. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, her spirit unbroken by the shadows that had sought to claim her. and so she lived her life, a guardian of secrets, a keeper of shadows, forever bound to the mysterious world that lay beyond the wardrobe. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Laboratory. Deep in the heart of an isolated forest, hidden away from prying eyes, stood an abandoned laboratory. Built during the Cold War era, it was once a site for secretive experiments. The locals considered it a cursed place and avoided it, passing down eerie legends about what transpired within its walls. Many years ago, a brilliant scientist named Dr. Alexander Gray worked there. He was one of the leading researchers, focusing on the exploration of human consciousness and its boundaries. However, when the experiments began crossing ethical lines, he left the project, unable to bear the mounting pressure from authorities. Now, decades later, Dr. Gray received a mysterious letter. It contained just one ominous sentence: "Return to finish what was started." The letter wasn't signed, but Dr. Gray knew exactly where it came from. The unsolved mysteries of his past gnawed at him, and he decided to revisit the laboratory to uncover what had really happened. Chapter 2. Return to the Past. Dr. Gray arrived at the abandoned laboratory late in the evening. The decaying structure was even more menacing than he remembered. Dark windows and peeling paint gave it the appearance of a haunted face, staring blankly into the night. Inside, it was deathly silent. Dusty corridors and old laboratory rooms were shrouded in cobwebs. Dr. Gray walked through familiar spaces, lost in memories of the time he spent there. When he entered the main lab, he noticed that some of the equipment was still operational. To his shock, data displayed on a screen showed that experiments had continued even after he left the project. These records detailed human trials that should have never been conducted. The scientists had attempted to implant artificial consciousness into the human brain, creating something that could function independently of the body. It was incredibly dangerous and unethical, yet the drive for scientific advancement pushed them to pursue it. Chapter 3. The Disappearing People. As Dr. Gray delved deeper into the data, he began to notice odd occurrences. It felt as though someone, or something, was watching him. He wasn't alone in this eerie place. Occasionally, he heard rustling noises and faint footsteps, but every time he turned around, he found nothing. During the night, as he tried to rest in one of the decrepit rooms, he was startled by a loud crash. It sounded like something heavy had fallen to the floor. Dr. Gray hurried to the lab and discovered that a door to one of the sealed rooms had swung open. Inside, he found journals and records about people who had been used for the experiments. These missing persons had been brought here and subjected to horrifying tests. The notes revealed that some of them survived the procedures but had been transformed into something entirely different. They lost their humanity and became living puppets. The further he read, the more he realized that these creatures, once human, might still be in the facility. They were the product of the artificial consciousness experiments. A shiver ran down his spine as he understood the reality of the horror he was part of. Chapter 4. The Awakening. Later that night, while investigating the lab, Dr. Gray began seeing strange shadows moving across the walls. These weren't mere reflections, they seemed to have their own will. He knew it was time to leave, but the lab seemed to have a grip on him. As he prepared to leave, Dr. Gray stumbled upon a hidden section of the laboratory. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting him in. He hesitated for a moment, then entered. The room was filled with old machinery and dusty monitors, displaying the remnants of decades-old experiments. One monitor flickered to life, showing a series of cryptic codes and data that indicated ongoing operations. The experiments were not only conducted on unwilling human subjects, but had also been extended to themselves. Experimenting on consciousness. Dr. Gray realized the gravity of what he had uncovered. These tests sought to merge artificial intelligence with human thought, creating a hybrid being. The implications were terrifying. These creatures had the potential to outthink and overpower humans. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room was plunged into darkness. Dr. Gray heard a whisper, a faint, disembodied voice speaking from the shadows, beckoning him deeper into the lab. The voice was unsettlingly familiar, yet distorted as though it had passed through 1,000 electronic filters. With a growing sense of dread, he moved through the labyrinthine halls, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. He finally reached a chamber marked Subject 0. The origin of the experiments. Inside, he found a containment pod, its glass fogged over. As he wiped it clean, his heart skipped a beat. Inside the pod lay a figure that resembled himself, a perfect replica, with eyes closed as if in a deep sleep. Dr. Gray staggered back, realizing the truth. The experiments were not just about creating new consciousness but about duplicating and manipulating existing ones. Chapter 5. A Living Nightmare. Before he could process this revelation, a loud clang reverberated through the lab. The pod's lock disengaged, and the glass slowly opened. The figure within stirred, its eyes snapping open to reveal a cold, calculating intelligence. This doppelganger, a product of the laboratory's twisted experiments, stepped out and fixed its gaze on Dr. Gray. It moved with eerie precision, its every action mirroring what a normal human would do, yet there was something inherently wrong about it. Like a puppet without strings, dancing to an unseen tune, Dr. Gray backed away, searching for an escape route. But the lab had become a maze, each turn leading him further into the depths of its dark secrets. The walls seemed to close in on him, and the whispers from the shadows grew louder, as if the very building conspired to trap him. In desperation, he stumbled into a room lined with metal shelves, filled with dusty old files and prototype devices. One such device caught his eye, a handheld contraption labeled Consciousness Disruptor. It was an experimental piece designed to destabilize artificial neural links. With no other option, he grabbed the device and turned to face his clone. The replica advanced with unsettling calm, as if it had all the time in the world. Dr. Gray activated the disruptor, aiming it at the creature. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the device powered up. And the doppelganger faltered, its movements becoming jerky and disoriented. Chapter 6. The Final Confrontation. The disruptor seemed to work, but it wouldn't hold for long. Dr. Gray knew he had to escape and destroy the laboratory to prevent any further atrocities. He dashed through the corridors, the echoes of the clone's pursuit reverberating behind him. He reached the control room, where a large switch labeled Emergency Containment Protocol caught his attention. This was the lab's failsafe, designed to purge all active experiments in the event of a breach. But activating it would also seal the laboratory permanently, trapping him inside. Dr. Gray hesitated, the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders. As the footsteps of his clone grew nearer, he realized there was no choice. With a deep breath, he slammed the switch. Alarms blared, and the building shook as containment procedures began. Dr. Gray sprinted toward the exit, dodging falling debris and flickering lights. The clone's distorted voice echoed through the halls, a haunting reminder of what he had created. Finally, he burst through the laboratory doors and into the forest beyond. The structure groaned as it sealed itself, a tomb for the horrors within. Dr. Gray collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, the morning sun casting long shadows across the forest floor. Epilogue. The legacy of experiments. Years passed, but the events in the lab haunted Dr. Gray's dreams. The knowledge of what he had witnessed, and the role he played weighed heavily on his conscience. He dedicated the remainder of his life to ensuring that such experiments were never conducted again, sharing his story with the world as a cautionary tale of unchecked ambition. The laboratory remained sealed, a relic of human hubris hidden deep within the forest. But the whispers of its past lingered in the air, a chilling reminder of the dark legacy it left behind. And somewhere in the depths of his mind, Dr. Gray knew the shadows of his doppelganger still lurked, waiting for the day it might rise again from the ashes of forgotten science. Chapter 1. The circus comes to town. The small town of Maplewood had always been a quiet place, nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. Its streets were lined with quaint cottages and small shops, where everyone knew each other by name. Life moved at a leisurely pace, and the townsfolk took comfort in their predictable routines. But that sense of tranquility was shattered one gray autumn afternoon when the circus rolled into town. The circus was called the Magnificent Mirth and Marvel Circus, and it arrived with an air of mystery and excitement. Brightly painted wagons and towering tents appeared overnight on the outskirts of Maplewood. The townspeople were abuzz with anticipation, curious about the spectacles that awaited them. Posters advertising the circus had been plastered all over town, promising a show unlike any other. A world of wonders and whimsy. Among the many attractions, the one that intrigued the townspeople most was the Clown Brigade. The posters featured garishly dressed clowns with exaggerated smiles, red noses, and painted faces. Their eyes seemed to follow you wherever you went, creating a strange mix of amusement and unease. Tom, a 15-year-old boy with an adventurous spirit, was particularly drawn to the idea of the circus. He had heard stories from his grandfather about the days when circuses were grand and magical. Tom imagined himself in a bygone era, captivated by the wonders of the world. As the day of the circus performance drew closer, an air of excitement filled Maplewood. Children begged their parents for tickets, and even the most skeptical adults found themselves curious. But amid the anticipation, there was an underlying sense of unease. Some of the older residents whispered about the strange occurrences that often followed circuses: disappearances, mysterious accidents, and the peculiar behavior of those who dared to get too close. Despite these whispers, Tom was determined to see the circus. He convinced his friends, Jenny and Mark, to join him. Together, they scraped together their savings and bought tickets for the opening night. The trio could hardly contain their excitement as they made their way to the circus grounds, unaware of the nightmare that awaited them. Chapter 2. The eerie evening. The night of the circus had arrived, and a thick fog had settled over Maplewood, wrapping the town in an eerie shroud. The trio made their way to the circus grounds, the excitement palpable in the air. The circus was alive with vibrant colors and festive music that seemed to drift through the fog, luring visitors to the entrance. The entrance itself was grand, a large, striped tent with glowing lanterns guiding the way. The ticket master, an old man with an unsettling grin, tore their tickets with a flourish and welcomed them in with a raspy voice. "Welcome, welcome to the magnificent Mirth and Marvel Circus. Prepare to be amazed." Inside the main tent, the atmosphere was electric. The air was filled with the scent of popcorn and cotton candy, and the crowd buzzed with anticipation. As the lights dimmed, a spotlight illuminated the center ring, and the ringmaster, a tall, thin man with a top hat, stepped forward. His voice boomed through the tent, introducing a series of thrilling acts: daring acrobats, enchanting magicians, and graceful dancers. But the main attraction was yet to come. The ringmaster's eyes gleamed as he announced the arrival of the Clown Brigade. The audience erupted in applause, but Tom felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something unsettling about clowns: their painted faces, exaggerated expressions, and unpredictable antics. Yet he brushed off his unease, determined to enjoy the show. The clowns burst into the ring, a riot of color and chaos. They tumbled and juggled, their movements synchronized to the upbeat music. The audience laughed and cheered, but Tom couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Their smiles seemed too wide, their eyes too focused. It was as if they were watching the audience rather than performing for them. As the performance continued, Tom noticed that the clowns were paying special attention to certain audience members, particularly the children. They would lock eyes with them, their grins growing wider, and whisper among themselves. Tom's discomfort grew, but he kept it to himself, not wanting to spoil the evening for his friends. The show reached its crescendo, and the clowns disappeared in a cloud of confetti, leaving the audience in awe. As the lights came up, the ringmaster thanked everyone for attending and invited them to explore the rest of the circus. Tom, Jenny, and Mark left the main tent, exhilarated but still feeling the strange undercurrent of unease. They wandered through the circus grounds, exploring the various attractions: a haunted house, games of chance, and fortune-telling booths. The night was full of wonder, but there was a sense of something lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to reveal itself. Chapter 3. The Clown's Lair. As the night wore on, the crowd began to thin, and the trio found themselves near the edge of the circus grounds. They noticed a smaller tent, set apart from the others, with a sign that read, "The Clown's Lair. Enter if you dare." Curiosity piqued, they decided to investigate. Inside, the tent was dimly lit, with twisted funhouse mirrors lining the walls. The mirrors distorted their reflections, turning their faces into grotesque caricatures. Laughter echoed around them, but it was not the joyful sound of a crowd enjoying a show. It was eerie and disjointed, as if the tent itself was mocking them. As they navigated the maze of mirrors, the laughter grew louder and more unsettling. Shadows flickered at the edge of their vision, and they felt as though they were being watched. A sense of foreboding washed over them, and Tom, with growing apprehension, suggested they leave. But as they turned to retrace their steps, they realized they were not alone. A figure emerged from the shadows, a clown, unlike any they had seen before. Its makeup was smeared, and its eyes glinted with malice. It moved toward them with unsettling grace, its laughter growing louder and more maniacal. The trio backed away, heartbeats racing, as the clown closed in. In a moment of desperation, they bolted, racing through the maze of mirrors, the distorted reflections only adding to their confusion. The laughter followed them, a relentless echo that seemed to come from every direction. They finally burst out of the tent, gasping for air, the laughter still ringing in their ears. They stumbled away, adrenaline coursing through their veins, determined to leave the circus behind. As they made their way back to the main area, they noticed that the circus grounds had transformed. The vibrant lights had dimmed, and the festive music was replaced by an eerie silence. The attraction seemed to have taken on a sinister air. And the people, those who remained, wandered as if in a daze, their eyes vacant and hollow. Tom, Jenny, and Mark knew they had to leave, but as they headed for the exit, they realized that the path was no longer there. The entrance had vanished, replaced by a high fence that loomed over them, trapping them inside the circus. Chapter 4. The Carnival of Nightmares. Panic set in as they frantically searched for a way out. The circus grounds had become a twisted labyrinth, and the shadows seemed to shift and move with a will of their own. Everywhere they turned, they found only dead ends and mocking reflections. As they wandered, they stumbled upon an old carousel, its paint chipped and weathered. The carousel animals, once whimsical and charming, were now grotesque and menacing, their eyes following the trio as they passed. The music, a warped and discordant melody, played from somewhere unseen. Desperate for answers, they approached the carousel, hoping to find a clue or a way out. As they neared, the ride sprang to life. The animals moving with unnatural speed and grace. The laughter returned, echoing through the night, as the carousel spun faster and faster. In the chaos, Tom caught a glimpse of something in the center of the carousel, a control panel, flickering with erratic lights. Without thinking, he leaped onto the ride, dodging the whirling animals, and made his way to the panel. The controls were old and rusted, but he managed to find a switch labeled Emergency Exit. With a flick, the carousel ground to a halt, and the lights dimmed. The laughter ceased, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. The trio disembarked from the ride, shaken but determined. The switch had revealed a hidden pathway leading away from the circus, winding through the dark forest. It was their only chance at escape, and they took it without hesitation. Chapter 5. The Final Confrontation. As they made their way down the path, they heard the sound of footsteps behind them. Turning, they saw a group of clowns emerging from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. These were not the performers they had seen earlier. These clowns were something else entirely, creatures of malevolence and malice. The trio broke into a sprint, racing through the forest with the clowns in pursuit. The trees closed in around them, and the path twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the darkness. Their pursuers gained ground, their laughter ringing in the night. But just as the clowns closed in, the forest opened up, revealing a clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center stood a crumbling old stage, its wooden planks creaking underfoot. With no other choice, they took to the stage, hoping it might offer some protection. As they reached the center, a brilliant light enveloped them, and the clowns halted at the edge of the clearing, unable to advance. In that moment, Tom understood that the stage was a sanctuary, a relic from an ancient time when the forest was a place of magic and mystery. The light that surrounded them was a barrier, keeping the clowns at bay. The creatures snarled and snapped, their facade of painted smiles slipping to reveal something far more sinister. But they could not breach the light, and the trio watched as the clowns slowly retreated, vanishing into the shadows. Epilogue. The aftermath. As dawn broke over Maplewood, Tom, Jenny, and Mark found themselves back at the entrance to the circus grounds. The tents were gone, and the circus had vanished as if it had never been. The town was quiet once more, the events of the night fading like a forgotten dream, but the trio knew it was no dream. They had faced the darkness and lived to tell the tale. The experience had changed them, leaving a mark that would never fade. They vowed to keep the story alive, warning others of the dangers that lurked beyond the veil of reality. And though the circus was gone, they knew it was not the end. The clowns were still out there, waiting in the shadows for the next unsuspecting town to wander into their web. The laughter outside the window. Chapter 1. Moving in. When Tom and Sarah Miller first moved into the quaint, old house on Oakwood Drive, they were filled with excitement. It was their dream home, a two-story Victorian with charming details, nestled in a quiet neighborhood surrounded by tall, Whispering Pines. The house was a perfect blend of rustic charm and modern convenience, with its creaky wooden floors, antique fixtures, and a sprawling backyard that seemed to promise endless summer nights under the stars. The day they moved in, their neighbors came by to greet them with warm smiles and welcome baskets. The Johnsons, an elderly couple who lived next door, told stories of the house's history, recounting tales of its previous owners. They alluded to an old rumor that the house was haunted, but quickly dismissed it as mere town folklore. The Millers laughed it off, brushing aside any thoughts of ghosts or ghouls. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the neighborhood, Tom and Sarah began unpacking boxes, arranging their belongings to make the house feel like home. It wasn't long before the house was filled with the comforting aromas of Sarah's cooking and the warm glow of lamps, pushing away any lingering shadows. Their first night in the house passed uneventfully. The couple lay in bed, feeling content and happy, listening to the gentle rustle of leaves outside their window. They drifted off to sleep with dreams of a bright future in their new home. However, as the clock ticked past midnight, a faint, unsettling sound drifted through the open window, a distant laughter, barely audible, carried on the wind. It was a soft, eerie giggle that seemed to echo through the trees. Tom stirred in his sleep, momentarily awakened by the sound, but quickly dismissed it as the echo of some late-night revelers down the street. He turned over and fell back into a deep sleep, unaware of the true source of the laughter that had danced through the night. Chapter 2: The Persistent Echo. The next morning, Tom awoke with the sound of the strange laughter still lingering in his mind. He mentioned it to Sarah over breakfast, who chuckled and teased him about his vivid imagination. "It's probably just some kids playing a prank," she suggested with a reassuring smile. They both laughed it off, eager to get on with their day. There was still plenty to unpack, and they had plans to explore the neighborhood. As the sun climbed high in the sky, they spent the day organizing their home, hanging pictures on the walls, and arranging furniture. That evening, as dusk settled and the shadows grew long, the Millers sat on their porch, sipping tea and enjoying the cool breeze. The neighborhood was peaceful, and the air was filled with the gentle chirping of crickets. But as the darkness deepened, Tom found himself glancing towards the woods that bordered their backyard. The trees stood tall and silent, a thick wall of shadows and secrets. "Do you hear that?" Tom asked suddenly, his ears straining to catch a sound just beyond their hearing. Sarah tilted her head, listening carefully. "I don't hear anything," she replied, her voice tinged with amusement. Tom frowned, certain he had heard something, a soft, fleeting echo of laughter, almost like the one from the previous night. It was so faint that it was easy to dismiss as a trick of the mind or the wind playing tricks. Deciding it was nothing, they retired for the night, settling into their bed. Tom tried to shake off the unease, convincing himself that he was simply on edge from the move. As the hours passed and sleep claimed them, the laughter returned. This time it was clearer, more distinct, a giggle that seemed to dance just outside their window. It was a haunting melody, laced with something sinister and mocking. Tom sat up in bed, his heart pounding. He listened intently, trying to pinpoint the source. It felt as though someone, or something, was standing just beyond the window, watching them, laughing softly in the dark. "Sarah," he whispered, gently shaking her awake. "What is it?" She mumbled sleepily, rubbing her eyes. "Do you hear that?" Tom asked, his voice tense. Sarah listened, the room silent except for the faint ticking of the clock. And then, there it was, the laughter, drifting in through the window like an unwelcome guest. Her eyes widened, and she grabbed Tom's arm. "Who could be out there at this time of night?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Tom shook his head, rising from the bed. "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." He moved towards the window, cautiously pulling back the curtain. The yard was bathed in moonlight, the trees casting long, eerie shadows across the grass. There was no sign of anyone outside, but the laughter continued, echoing faintly through the night. "It's coming from the woods," Tom said, his eyes scanning the tree line. Sarah joined him at the window, peering into the darkness. "This is so strange," she murmured. "It almost sounds childlike." They stood there for a while, the laughter slowly fading away, leaving behind an unsettling silence. Tom closed the window, locking it securely. "We should call the police if it happens again," he suggested, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Sarah nodded, but neither of them could shake the feeling of being watched. As they returned to bed, the laughter haunted their thoughts, a lingering specter that refused to be ignored. Chapter 3. The mystery deepens. The following days were uneventful, though Tom and Sarah couldn't shake the eerie feeling that had settled over their home. They went about their routines, trying to ignore the unsettling events of the previous nights. However, the laughter continued to haunt them, always returning just as the clock struck midnight. Tom decided to do some investigating, hoping to find an explanation. He began by talking to their neighbors, curious if anyone else had heard the strange sounds. Mr. Johnson, their elderly neighbor, shook his head when Tom asked. "I haven't heard anything like that, but there have been stories about those woods," he said cryptically. Tom's curiosity was piqued. "What kind of stories?" Mr. Johnson leaned closer, lowering his voice. "They say that the woods are haunted. Years ago, a young girl disappeared in those trees. They searched for days but never found her. Some say her spirit lingers, laughing in the night, trying to lure others into the woods." Tom felt a chill run down his spine. He thanked Mr. Johnson and returned home, his mind racing with possibilities. Could there really be a ghost in the woods? Or was someone playing a cruel prank on them? That evening, he shared the story with Sarah, who was skeptical. "Ghosts? Come on, Tom, you don't really believe that, do you?" "I don't know what to believe," Tom admitted. "But something strange is going on, and I want to find out what it is." They decided to set up a camera by the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever, or whatever, was behind the laughter. As night fell, they watched the footage intently, waiting for any sign of movement. The hours passed slowly, the house filled with tension. As midnight approached, the laughter began once more. Tom and Sarah held their breath, eyes glued to the screen. The camera captured the moonlit yard, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. But there was no sign of anyone outside. The laughter grew louder, more insistent, yet the camera showed nothing but empty space. It was as if the sound itself was a ghost, an invisible presence taunting them from the shadows. Frustrated and frightened, Tom turned off the camera. "I don't understand. There's no one there. Maybe it really is a spirit," Sarah suggested reluctantly, the fear evident in her voice. They spent the rest of the night wide awake, the laughter echoing in their ears long after it had ceased. Chapter 4. Into the woods. The following day, Tom was determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. He decided to venture into the woods, hoping to find clues about the source of the laughter. Sarah was hesitant, but she agreed to accompany him, not wanting him to go alone. Armed with flashlights and a growing sense of dread, they made their way into the forest as the sun began to set. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. The path was narrow and overgrown, the underbrush rustling with unseen creatures. Every snap of a twig sent shivers down their spines, but they pressed on, driven by the need for answers, as they delved deeper into the woods. The air grew colder, the shadows lengthening. The laughter began again, distant at first, but growing louder with each step they took. Tom and Sarah exchanged a nervous glance, their resolve tested by the eerie chorus echoing through the trees. They followed the sound, guided by its haunting melody, until they reached a small clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center of the clearing stood an old, weathered well, its stones covered in moss and ivy. The laughter seemed to emanate from the well itself, a chilling echo that sent chills down their spines. Tom approached cautiously, peering into the darkness below. The well was deep, the bottom obscured by shadows. As he leaned closer, the laughter intensified, filling the air with its unsettling mirth. "This is where it's coming from," Tom whispered, a mixture of fear and fascination in his voice. Sarah joined him, peering over the edge. "Do you think it's haunted?" Tom hesitated, unsure of what to believe. "I don't know, but it doesn't feel right." They backed away from the well, the laughter fading as they retreated. It seemed as though the forest itself was alive, watching them with unseen eyes. Chapter 5. The Haunting Truth. That night, Tom and Sarah returned home, their minds racing with questions and fear. The laughter continued to plague them, each night growing louder, more insistent. Desperate for answers, Tom decided to do some research on the house and its history. He spent hours poring over old newspapers and town records, searching for any mention of the mysterious girl who had disappeared. His efforts paid off when he stumbled upon an article detailing the disappearance of a young girl named Emily Turner. She had vanished from her home nearly 50 years ago, last seen playing near the woods behind Oakwood Drive. Despite extensive searches, no trace of her was ever found. Tom shared the discovery with Sarah, his heart heavy with the weight of the past. "I think she's the one haunting the woods," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of sadness and fear. Sarah nodded, her skepticism waning in the face of the evidence. "But why is she laughing? What does she want?" Tom shook his head, unable to provide an answer. The laughter seemed to hold a sinister edge, as if it were mocking them, drawing them closer to some dark truth hidden within the forest. Determined to find a way to put the spirit to rest, they sought the advice of a local historian who specialized in the supernatural. The historian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Green, listened intently to their story, her eyes narrowing with concern. "I've heard of the girl," Mrs. Green said, her voice tinged with sadness. "Her spirit is trapped, unable to find peace. You must help her move on. But how do we do that?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with desperation. Mrs. Green thought for a moment before replying. "You must return to the well. Offer her a gift, something personal that holds meaning. Speak to her, let her know she is not forgotten. Only then can she find peace." With renewed purpose, Tom and Sarah prepared to return to the woods, determined to lay Emily's spirit to rest. They selected a small music box that had belonged to Sarah's grandmother, a cherished heirloom that played a soft, haunting melody as night fell. They made their way back to the clearing, the moon casting an eerie glow over the forest. The laughter greeted them, echoing through the trees like a ghostly serenade. Tom approached the well, placing the music box on its edge. The melody began to play, a gentle tune that mingled with the laughter, creating a haunting symphony. "Emily," Tom called out, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. "We know you're here. We want to help you find peace." The laughter ceased, replaced by an expectant silence that hung heavy in the air. "You are not forgotten," Sarah added, her voice soft and sincere. "We offer you this gift. Please find rest." For a moment, the forest held its breath, the trees standing as silent witnesses to the exchange. Then, slowly, the music box stopped playing, and the air seemed to lighten, as if a great weight had been lifted. Tom and Sarah waited, hearts pounding, but the laughter did not return. The woods were quiet, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Chapter 6. Peace restored. In the days that followed, the eerie laughter was no more. The Millers felt a sense of relief, as if a dark cloud had been lifted from their lives. The woods behind their home no longer felt ominous but instead seemed filled with a serene beauty. Tom and Sarah visited the well once more, leaving flowers as a tribute to the girl whose spirit had haunted their nights. They hoped that Emily had found peace, her laughter no longer a cry for attention but a gentle whisper carried on the wind. The story of the haunted woods became a part of the Millers' history, a tale they would share with friends and family as a reminder of the mysteries that lay just beyond the edge of perception. Though the laughter was gone, Tom and Sarah would never forget the lessons they had learned, the importance of acknowledging the past, and the power of compassion to heal even the most restless of spirits. As they sat on their porch, watching the sun set behind the trees, they felt a sense of gratitude for their home and the experiences they had shared. The house on Oakwood Drive was no longer just a place to live, it was a part of their story, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. And though the laughter had faded into memory, they knew that the forest held its own secrets, waiting patiently for the next chapter to unfold. Epilogue. A new beginning. Years passed, and the Millers continued to live happily in their beloved home. The story of Emily Turner became a cherished family legend, passed down through generations as a reminder of the mysteries that lay hidden in the world. Visitors to their home would often ask about the woods and the tale of the haunted well. Tom and Sarah would share the story with a knowing smile, watching as their guests listened with rapt attention. The laughter had long since faded, but the memory of those nights remained, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of compassion to bridge the gap between the living and the lost. As the sun set on another peaceful day, Tom and Sarah stood hand in hand, gazing out at the forest that had once held so much fear. They knew that life was full of mysteries, but they also knew that love and understanding could light even the darkest paths. The house on Oakwood Drive stood as a beacon of hope, a reminder that even the most restless spirits could find peace when they were finally seen and heard. And as the evening breeze whispered through the trees, The Millers knew that they were home, truly home, in a place where the past and present existed in harmony, and where laughter was no longer a haunting echo, but a joyful reminder of the journey they had taken together. Once upon a time in the park, Chapter 1. A sunny afternoon. The sky was a clear, brilliant blue, and the sun shone warmly on the bustling city of Fairview. It was a perfect Saturday afternoon, and the local park was filled with people enjoying the summer weather. Families picnicked on the lush green lawns, children played on the swings and slides, and couples strolled hand in hand along the winding paths. In the heart of the park, near a tranquil pond where ducks swam lazily, a group of friends had gathered for an impromptu picnic. Emma, Alex, Mia, and Jake sat on a colorful blanket spread out on the grass, surrounded by an assortment of snacks and drinks. "Isn't this great?" Emma sighed, taking in the serene beauty of the park. "It's nice to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city for a while." Jake nodded, popping a grape into his mouth. "Absolutely. It feels like we're in another world here." Mia stretched out on the blanket, closing her eyes and basking in the sun. "This is exactly what I needed. Just us, the sun, and no worries." Alex, ever the thrill-seeker, sat up with a mischievous grin. "Hey, did you guys hear about the old part of the park that's supposed to be haunted?" Emma raised an eyebrow, curious despite herself. "Haunted? What are you talking about?" "You know, the section of the park that's closed off with that rusty old gate," Alex explained, pointing toward a dense cluster of trees in the distance. "They say strange things happen there at night. People hear whispers, see shadows, and some even claim to have seen ghostly figures wandering around." Mia scoffed, though her interest was piqued. "That sounds like a load of nonsense. Maybe," Alex said with a shrug, "but it could be fun to check it out. Just think of it as a little adventure." Jake glanced at the others, a spark of curiosity in his eyes. "Why not? We could use a little excitement. What do you think, Emma?" Emma hesitated, torn between the comfort of their sunny picnic and the allure of exploring the mysterious part of the park. Eventually, her adventurous side won out. "All right, let's do it. But if things get too creepy, we're out of there." With their plan decided, the group packed up their picnic and set off towards the secluded section of the park, unaware of the chilling encounter that awaited them. Chapter 2. The Forgotten Gate. The friends followed a narrow path that wound its way through the park, leaving behind the cheerful sounds of children playing and birds singing. As they approached the old section, the atmosphere began to change. The air grew cooler, and the trees clustered more closely together, casting long shadows that danced eerily in the breeze. After a short walk, they arrived at a tall, rusty gate partially hidden by overgrown ivy and brambles. It creaked ominously as they pushed it open, revealing a neglected path that disappeared into the thick woods. "Welcome to the haunted part of the park," Alex said with a playful bow, though a hint of unease had crept into his voice. Emma peered down the path, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. "It looks like no one's been here for ages." Jake took a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over him. "Well, we came this far. Might as well see what's inside." They stepped through the gate, the rusty metal groaning as it swung shut behind them with a heavy clang. The path ahead was lined with ancient trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The undergrowth was thick, making the way forward difficult to navigate. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the sunlight filtering through the canopy grew dimmer, casting the path in an eerie twilight. The air was filled with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the forest was eerily silent, as if holding its breath. Mia wrapped her arms around herself, trying to dispel the growing sense of unease. "I don't like this. It feels like we're being watched." Alex chuckled, though his laughter was forced. "Come on, Mia, it's just your imagination. There's nothing here but trees and shadows." But despite his bravado, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The forest seemed alive with unseen eyes, watching their every move from the depths of the shadows. After walking for what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a small clearing, where the remains of an old stone fountain stood, covered in moss and ivy. The fountain was dry, its basin cracked and filled with dead leaves. Emma approached the fountain, running her fingers over the weathered stone. "It's beautiful in a way, isn't it? Like a forgotten relic from another time." Jake nodded, his eyes scanning the clearing. "Yeah, but it's also kind of creepy. I can see why people think this place is haunted." As they explored the clearing, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves and sending a chill down their spines. The shadows seemed to shift and move, forming shapes that danced at the edge of their vision. Suddenly, a soft, echoing laughter floated through the air, sending shivers down their spines. The sound was faint, like the laughter of children playing just beyond the trees, yet it held an unsettling quality that made their skin crawl. "Did you hear that?" Mia whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Emma nodded, her heart pounding. It sounded like laughter. Jake tried to brush it off, but his voice betrayed his unease. Probably just the wind playing tricks on us. But deep down, they all knew that the laughter was no ordinary sound. It was a chilling reminder that they were not alone in the woods, and whatever was lurking there was far from friendly. Chapter 3. The Whispering Woods. The friends exchanged nervous glances, their earlier bravado fading in the face of the eerie laughter that lingered in the air. Despite their apprehension, curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to press on, determined to uncover the mystery of the haunted park. They continued along the path, the trees closing in around them like silent sentinels. The laughter faded, replaced by a whispering sound that seemed to drift through the forest, coming from every direction at once. "What are they saying?" Alex muttered, straining to catch the words in the whispers. But the voices were indistinct, like echoes from a forgotten world. Mia shivered, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. "It's like they're trying to tell us something." Emma nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "Whatever it is, it doesn't feel welcoming." They reached a fork in the path, where the trail split into two directions. One path was overgrown and dark, leading deeper into the heart of the woods, while the other was clearer, leading toward a faint light in the distance. "Which way should we go?" Jake asked, glancing between the two options. Alex hesitated, torn between the thrill of adventure and the desire for safety. "I say we go deeper. That's where we'll find the real answers." Mia shook her head, her instincts urging her to take the safer path. "I don't know, guys. Maybe we should turn back." Emma considered their options, weighing the potential dangers against their curiosity. In the end, her adventurous spirit won out. "Let's go deeper. We've come this far, and we can't turn back now." Reluctantly, Mia agreed, and they ventured down the darker path, the forest growing thicker and more foreboding with each step. The whispers seemed to follow them, growing louder and more insistent as they moved deeper into the woods. The air grew colder, and the light filtering through the trees took on a greenish hue, casting an eerie glow over the path. The forest seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if the very trees were alive and watching their every move. As they walked, they stumbled upon a series of old, weathered gravestones, half hidden beneath the undergrowth. The stones were cracked and covered in moss, the names and dates worn away by time. Emma felt a shiver run down her spine as she studied the gravestones, a sense of unease settling over her. "I didn't know there was a graveyard here." Jake frowned, his eyes scanning the names on the stones. "These graves must be ancient. It's like they've been forgotten by time." Mia's voice was barely a whisper, her fear growing with each passing moment. "Do you think these are the people who haunt the woods?" Before anyone could answer, the laughter returned, echoing through the trees with a chilling intensity. The sound was louder now, more insistent, as if beckoning them deeper into the forest. Suddenly, a shadowy figure appeared at the edge of their vision, darting between the trees. It moved with unnatural speed, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "Did you see that?" Alex exclaimed, pointing toward the spot where the figure had been. Emma nodded, her heart racing. "What was that?" Jake's face was pale, his fear evident. "I don't know, but I think we should get out of here." But before they could decide on their next move, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The forest seemed to come alive, the trees swaying and creaking ominously. The whispers grew louder, forming a chorus of voices that seemed to rise from the very earth itself. "Leave this place," the voices seemed to say, their words echoing in the air like a warning. The friends exchanged panicked glances, the realization dawning on them that they had ventured too far into the woods. They turned to flee, but the path behind them had vanished, swallowed by the shifting shadows of the forest. Panic set in as they stumbled through the woods, the laughter and whispers following them like a sinister shadow. The trees seemed to close in around them, the forest becoming a maze of darkness and confusion. Chapter 4. The Ghostly Encounter. The friends ran blindly through the woods, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they fought to escape the clutches of the haunted forest. The laughter echoed in their ears, a chilling reminder of the presence that stalked them. Emma stumbled over a root, her heart pounding in her chest as she scrambled to her feet. "We need to find a way out of here." Alex helped her up, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of a way back. "I can't see anything. It's like the forest is alive, trying to keep us here." Mia clung to Jake's arm, her fear palpable. "We have to stick together. We'll find a way out if we stay calm." As they pressed on, the whispers grew more intense, their words forming a haunting melody that seemed to reverberate through the very air around them. "Follow the light," the voices seemed to urge, their tone a mix of urgency and menace. Desperate for any sign of escape, the friends followed the faint glow that flickered in the distance. The path twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the woods. At last, they emerged into a small clearing, where the moonlight shone brightly upon a solitary figure standing amidst the shadows. The figure was that of a young girl, her face pale and ethereal, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Emma gasped, recognizing the apparition from the old legend. "It's her, the ghost of the park." The girl gazed at them with a sorrowful expression, her presence both haunting and captivating. She raised a hand, beckoning them closer with a silent plea. Despite their fear, the friends felt an inexplicable pull toward the ghostly figure, as if drawn by an invisible force. They stepped forward cautiously, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they approached, the girl spoke, her voice a soft whisper that seemed to carry on the wind. "I have been trapped here for so long, lost and forgotten. Please help me find peace." The friends exchanged glances, their fear mingling with empathy for the lost soul before them. They knew they had to help her, to release her from the haunting grip of the woods. Emma stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "How can we help you?" The ghostly girl pointed toward the old well that stood at the edge of the clearing, its stone walls covered in moss and vines. "The key to my freedom lies within. Release it, and I shall be free." The friends hesitated, uncertain of what lay within the ancient well. But their desire to help the lost soul overcame their fear, and they approached the well with a mix of trepidation and determination. As they peered into the depths of the well, they saw a faint, glowing light emanating from its depths. The light pulsed gently, casting an eerie glow over the stones. Alex leaned over the edge, his curiosity getting the better of him. "What do you think it is?" Jake shrugged, though his heart raced with anticipation. "Only one way to find out." With a deep breath, Jake reached into the well, his hand brushing against the cold, damp stones. As he touched the light, a surge of energy coursed through him, and the whispers grew louder, resonating with an intensity that shook the very ground beneath them. The light began to rise from the depths, swirling around the friends in a dazzling display of colors and shadows. The whispers reached a crescendo, and the ghostly girl watched with hopeful eyes as the light enveloped her. In a flash of brilliance, the light vanished, leaving behind a profound silence that hung heavily in the air. The girl's ghostly form shimmered, her expression one of gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I am free." With those words, she faded from view, her spirit finally released from the haunting confines of the woods. Chapter 5: Escape from the Haunted Woods. The friends stood in stunned silence, the reality of their encounter sinking in. The forest, once filled with an eerie presence, now felt peaceful and still. "We did it," Mia said, her voice filled with awe. "We actually helped her." Emma nodded, a sense of accomplishment washing over her. "It's over. She's finally at peace." But their relief was short-lived, as the shadows around them began to shift once more. The forest, though no longer haunted by the ghostly laughter, still held an air of mystery and danger. "We need to get out of here," Jake urged, glancing around nervously. "I don't want to stick around to see what else is hiding in these woods." They retraced their steps, following the path that had led them to the clearing. The forest seemed to open up before them, the trees parting to reveal a familiar trail. As they hurried along the path, the whispers faded into the background, their haunting melody replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. The forest, though still foreboding, no longer felt as oppressive or malevolent. At last, they reached the rusty gate, its metal frame standing as a barrier between the haunted woods and the safety of the park. The friends pushed it open, the creaking sound echoing through the trees like a final farewell. Stepping back into the sunlit park, they were greeted by the sounds of laughter and play, a stark contrast to the eerie silence of the woods. The world outside the haunted section of the park felt warm and welcoming, a sanctuary from the supernatural events they had witnessed. As they made their way back to the main area of the park, they paused to reflect on their experience. The encounter with the ghostly girl had left a lasting impression on them, a reminder of the mysteries that lay hidden in the world around them. Chapter 6. The legend lives on. In the weeks that followed, the friends shared their story with others, recounting the tale of the haunted woods and the lost soul they had helped to find peace. Their adventure became a local legend, passed down through the community as a reminder of the park's mysterious history. Though some dismissed their tale as a mere ghost story, others were captivated by the mystery of the haunted woods, eager to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within its depths. Emma, Alex, Mia, and Jake remained bonded by their experience, their friendship strengthened by the trials they had faced together. They often returned to the park, drawn by the memories of their adventure and the sense of wonder that accompanied it. And though the laughter no longer echoed through the woods, the friends knew that the forest held its own magic, a reminder of the unseen world that lay just beyond the veil of reality. The park, once a place of leisure and play, had become a gateway to the unknown, a place where legends were born and mysteries unfolded. As they sat on the grassy hill, watching the sun set over the park, the friends felt a sense of gratitude for the adventure they had shared. They knew that the world was full of hidden wonders, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to seek them out. And so, the legend of the haunted woods lived on, a testament to the power of friendship, courage, and the enduring mystery of the supernatural. The Cabin in the Woods, Chapter 1, The Discovery. In a quiet town nestled in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, whispers of an ancient, abandoned cabin hidden deep in the forest had circulated for generations. The locals spoke of eerie lights flickering in the windows at night, and strange noises that carried on the wind. Some claimed the cabin was cursed, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred. Despite the warnings, curiosity often drew the brave and the foolish alike into the woods, seeking the truth behind the legends. One crisp autumn afternoon, a group of friends, Mark, Sarah, David, and Lisa, decided to investigate the mysterious cabin. They had grown up hearing the stories and felt compelled to uncover the truth. Equipped with flashlights, a map, and a sense of adventure, they set out into the forest, their excitement palpable. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows as they trekked deeper into the woods. The vibrant colors of the autumn leaves created a striking contrast against the darkening sky. As they walked, the sounds of the town faded, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the occasional call of a distant bird. The air grew colder, and an unsettling stillness settled over the forest. After hours of hiking, they came upon a narrow, overgrown path that led to a clearing. In the center stood the cabin. Just as the stories described, old, weathered, and seemingly abandoned. The wooden structure was covered in moss and ivy, its windows dark and foreboding. The roof sagged under the weight of years of neglect, and the front door hung slightly ajar, creaking ominously in the breeze. "This is it," Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The cabin." Sarah shivered, not just from the cold. "It looks even creepier than I imagined." David, ever the skeptic, shrugged. "It's just an old house. Let's check it out and prove there's nothing to be afraid of." Lisa hesitated, glancing around the clearing. "I don't know, guys. Maybe we should turn back. What if the stories are true?" Mark took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "We'll be fine. We're together. Let's just take a quick look." With a mixture of excitement and apprehension, they approached the cabin. The wooden steps creaked under their weight, and the door groaned in protest as they pushed it open. The air inside was musty, filled with the scent of decay and disuse. Dust motes floated in the dim light that filtered through the dirty windows. The interior was as decrepit as the exterior. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, and cobwebs draped the corners like ghostly curtains. An old fireplace stood against one wall, its hearth cold and empty. As they explored, the floorboards creaked underfoot, echoing through the silent cabin. "This place is a dump," David said, kicking at a broken chair. "I don't know why everyone makes such a big deal about it." Sarah, meanwhile, was drawn to an old, leather-bound book lying on a dusty table. She picked it up, blowing off the thick layer of dust. The cover was faded, but the title was still legible, The Journal of Elias Blackwood. "Hey guys, look at this," she called, holding up the book. "It looks like a journal." Mark and Lisa gathered around as Sarah opened the book. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with handwritten entries and sketches. The handwriting was neat but hurried, as if the author had been desperate to record his thoughts. Chapter 2, The Journal. Sarah began to read aloud, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and fear. The entries described the life of Elias Blackwood, a reclusive man who had lived in the cabin over a century ago. He had moved to the forest seeking solitude and peace, but his writings revealed a descent into madness. October 12, 1887. I have settled into my new home, far from the prying eyes of society. The forest is peaceful, and I feel a sense of tranquility here that I have not known in years. November 5, 1887. Strange occurrences plague my nights. Unseen hands seem to brush against my skin, and whispers echo through the cabin. I cannot discern their source. December 21st, 1887. The whispers have grown louder, more insistent. They speak of things I cannot understand. I feel as though I am being watched, even when I am alone. January 10, 1888. I have discovered an ancient symbol carved into the floorboards beneath my bed. It is a sigil of protection, but against what? I fear I am not alone in this cabin. As Sarah read, a chill settled over the group. The journal entries painted a picture of a man tormented by unseen forces, trapped in a nightmare from which he could not escape. Maybe we should leave, Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. This place gives me the creeps. Mark nodded, but his curiosity got the better of him. Let's just check out the rest of the cabin first. There might be more clues about what happened here. Reluctantly, the others agreed. They explored the small rooms, finding little more than broken furniture and dust-covered remnants of a long-forgotten life. In one corner, they discovered a trapdoor partially hidden beneath a threadbare rug. What's down there? David wondered, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. Only one way to find out, Mark said, pulling the trapdoor open. A set of narrow, rickety stairs led down into darkness. With their flashlights in hand, they descended into the basement. The air grew colder and more oppressive with each step. The basement was a small, cramped space filled with old crates and barrels. The walls were lined with shelves holding jars of preserved food, long since spoiled. In the center of the room stood a large, stone altar covered in strange symbols. The altar was stained with dark, dried blood, and the air was thick with the scent of iron and decay. What the hell is this? David muttered, his bravado fading in the face of the gruesome discovery. Sarah's flashlight beam landed on another journal, this one bound in dark leather and covered in more of the strange symbols. She picked it up, her hands shaking as she opened it. The entries were written in the same hurried hand, but the content was even more disturbing. February 15, 1888. The voices demand a sacrifice. They promise power and knowledge in exchange. I am torn between fear and the desire to understand. March 3, 1888. I have done as they asked. The rituals are bloody, but the voices have quieted. I fear what I have unleashed, but I cannot turn back now. April 12, 1888. The shadows move on their own. I see faces in the dark, watching, waiting. I am a prisoner in my own home, bound by the choices I have made. The final entry was dated May 1, 1888. I can no longer endure the torment. The voices, the shadows, they are all consuming. I fear for my soul. If anyone finds this journal, know that I have failed. The cabin is cursed, and it will claim all who enter. Chapter 3. The haunting begins. The friends stood in stunned silence, the weight of Elias Blackwood's words hanging heavily in the air. The basement felt colder, and the oppressive atmosphere seemed to close in around them. We need to get out of here, Lisa said, her voice trembling. This place is cursed. Mark nodded, his face pale. Let's go. We've seen enough. As they ascended the stairs, the air grew heavier, and a low, whispering sound filled the cabin. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the rooms like the voices of 1,000 tortured souls. The friends hurried toward the front door, but as they reached it, the door slammed shut with a force that shook the entire cabin. The whispers became a cacophony, filling their minds with a sense of dread and despair. What's happening? David shouted, his voice barely audible over the din. The shadows in the room began to move, coalescing into dark, indistinct shapes that seemed to watch them with malevolent intent. The air grew colder, and a deep, resonant growl echoed through the cabin. Sarah clutched the journal to her chest, her heart pounding. We need to break the curse. There has to be something in the journal that can help us. They huddled together, flipping through the pages of the journal as the shadows closed in around them. The symbols on the altar seemed to glow with a faint, eerie light, casting strange patterns on the walls. Mark pointed to a page filled with intricate drawings and symbols. Look, there's a ritual here. It says it's a banishment spell, but we need to perform it at the altar. Do we have a choice? Sarah replied, her voice shaking. We have to try. They made their way back to the basement, the shadows following them like a dark tide. The air was thick with tension as they gathered around the altar, the journal open before them. Mark began to recite the incantation, his voice trembling with fear. The symbols on the altar glowed brighter, and the shadows seemed to recoil, as if in pain. The ground trembled, and the oppressive atmosphere grew even more intense. The friends joined hands, their voices rising in unison as they repeated the incantation. The air crackled with energy, and the shadows writhed and twisted, their forms becoming more defined and grotesque. Terror in the Night Woods, Chapter 1, The Whispers. The warm summer evening settled over a small town surrounded by dense forest. Over the past few weeks, strange occurrences in these woods had set the locals on edge. Whispers of ghostly figures, unsettling noises, and vanishing animals filled the town, painting a portrait of fear that seemed to grow with each passing day. In the heart of the town, four friends were preparing for an adventure. Emily, Jake, Mike, and Anna had heard the stories and decided to investigate the woods for themselves. They were young and curious, drawn to the allure of the unknown, convinced that the eerie tales were nothing more than products of an overactive imagination. The group met at the edge of the forest just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The last rays of light cast long shadows across the path that led into the woods. Emily, always the leader, stepped forward first, her flashlight beam cutting through the encroaching darkness. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Anna whispered, glancing nervously at the thick line of trees that seemed to beckon them inward. Jake shrugged with a confident grin. "Come on, Anna. We've been talking about this for weeks. Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" Mike chuckled, adjusting the backpack on his shoulder. "Exactly. It's just a walk in the woods. We'll be back before we know it." Anna sighed but nodded, taking a deep breath to calm her nerves. They followed Emily, their flashlights creating dancing beams that flickered over the underbrush. As they ventured deeper, the path narrowed, and the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees were tall and ancient, their gnarled branches reaching out like twisted fingers. The air grew cooler, and the once comforting sounds of the town faded away, replaced by the symphony of nocturnal life. Owls hooted from unseen perches, and the rustling of leaves hinted at the presence of hidden creatures. The friends walked in silence for a while, their senses heightened by the creeping darkness. After about half an hour, they reached a clearing. The moonlight bathed the open space in a silvery glow, illuminating a circle of stone ruins at its center. "Wow," Emily breathed, stepping closer to the ruins. "I didn't know this was here." The stones were covered in moss and vines, standing like silent sentinels from a forgotten era. They formed a crude circle, with one large stone in the middle, resembling an altar. "This place is so strange," Mike murmured, running his fingers over the cool stone surface. Jake laughed, attempting to lighten the mood. "Maybe it's where they held cult meetings or something." Emily rolled her eyes but couldn't deny the shiver that ran down her spine. Despite the warmth of the summer night, the air around the ruins felt unnaturally cold. The friends explored the clearing, their curiosity driving them to examine every inch of the ruins. As they did, a sudden breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it an eerie whisper that seemed to echo from every direction. "What was that?" Anna asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Probably just the wind," Jake replied, though his own voice wavered. But Emily wasn't so sure. The whisper felt almost purposeful, as if it carried words she couldn't quite decipher. She looked around, scanning the shadows that loomed just beyond the reach of their flashlights. As they stood in the clearing, an unsettling feeling crept over them. The forest seemed to watch, the shadows shifting with a life of their own. "Maybe we should head back," Anna suggested, her unease growing with each passing moment. Mike nodded, sensing the change in the air. "Yeah, I think we've seen enough for tonight." Reluctantly, they turned to leave the clearing, but as they did, Emily's flashlight flickered, casting erratic beams that danced wildly over the stones. She tapped it against her palm, hoping to steady the light. These things always seem to die at the worst possible times," she muttered. Suddenly, the whispering intensified, growing louder and more insistent. The wind picked up, swirling around them with an almost malicious force. The temperature plummeted, and a chill settled over the clearing. "What the hell is going on?" Jake shouted over the rising noise. Emily felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, a primal instinct warning her of impending danger. The whispering was no longer just background noise. It had formed into distinct, unintelligible voices that seemed to come from every direction. They spun around, trying to pinpoint the source, but the voices were everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the trees like the cries of lost souls. "Let's get out of here!" Mike yelled, already backing away from the ruins. They turned and ran, their footsteps pounding against the forest floor as they fled the clearing. The voices pursued them, growing louder and more frantic, an otherworldly chorus that echoed in their minds. The path was narrow and winding, the trees closing in on either side as if trying to trap them. Branches clawed at their clothes and skin, the forest becoming a living entity determined to keep them within its grasp. Anna stumbled, her foot catching on an exposed root, and she fell hard to the ground. Jake skidded to a stop, reaching out to help her up. "Come on, we can't stop now," he urged, pulling her to her feet. They pressed on, adrenaline fueling their escape. The whispers continued to haunt them, each step seeming to bring the darkness closer, wrapping them in its suffocating embrace. As they finally burst through the tree-line, the forest spat them out onto the dirt road that led back to town. The oppressive atmosphere dissipated, and the whispers faded into the night. They stood there, panting and shaken, casting wary glances back at the forest that had almost claimed them. "What was that?" Anna gasped, clutching her chest in an attempt to steady her racing heart. Emily shook her head, still trying to process the encounter. "I don't know, but it wasn't natural." Jake nodded, his expression grim. "Whatever it was, we should stay far away from those woods from now on." The group made their way back to town, the weight of their experience hanging heavily over them. The fear lingered in their minds, a reminder that the stories they had dismissed might hold more truth than they had ever imagined. Chapter 2: The Truth Unveiled. The following day, the friends gathered at Emily's house, eager to make sense of what they had encountered in the woods. The experience had left them shaken, and the need for answers gnawed at them like a persistent itch. Emily spread out a map of the area on her dining room table, tracing their route through the forest with her finger. "The ruins are marked here," she said, pointing to a spot labeled Stone Circle. Anna frowned, peering at the map. "I've lived here my whole life and never heard of it. Why would something like that be in our woods?" Jake, who had spent the morning researching online, leaned forward with a grave expression. "I did some digging, and it turns out the Stone Circle has a dark history." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the group before continuing. Apparently, back in the 1800s, there was a cult that used those stones for rituals. They believed the forest was a gateway to another realm, and the stones were a portal. Mike raised an eyebrow skeptically. "A portal? To where?" Jake shrugged, the seriousness of his findings evident in his tone. "Nobody knows for sure. Some say it was a realm of spirits, others claim it was a place where the living could communicate with the dead." Emily felt a shiver crawl down her spine. The whispers they had heard last night took on a new, chilling significance. Were they the voices of the cult's lost souls, echoing across time? "What happened to the cult?" Anna asked, her curiosity piqued despite her lingering fear. "They disappeared," Jake replied. "One night, the entire group vanished without a trace. No bodies were ever found, and the Stone Circle was left abandoned." The room fell silent as the friends absorbed this information, the implications of their encounter with the supernatural looming over them. "So, what do we do now?" Mike finally asked, breaking the silence. Emily took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "We need to go back. We have to find out what those whispers were, and if there's any way to stop them." Anna looked at her in disbelief. "You can't be serious. After what happened last night, you want to go back into those woods?" Emily nodded, determination etched across her face. "I don't know about you, but I need answers. We can't just ignore this." Jake, who had been skeptical at first, found himself agreeing with Emily. The encounter had awakened something in him, a desire to uncover the truth that burned brightly beneath his fear. "I'm with Emily," he said. "If there's even a chance we can put those souls to rest, we have to try." Mike hesitated, weighing his options. The fear from the previous night still clung to him like a shadow, but he couldn't deny the pull of curiosity. "All right," he conceded. "I'm in. But we need to be careful." Anna sighed, knowing she couldn't let her friends go back without her. Despite her fear, the bond they shared was stronger, and she found herself nodding in agreement. "Fine. But the second anything feels off, we leave." With their decision made, the group spent the day preparing for their return to the woods. They gathered supplies, including extra flashlights, a compass, and a camera to document their findings. As the sun dipped below the horizon once more, they set off towards the forest, the memory of the previous night's encounter fueling their determination. Chapter 3: The Return. The path to the stone circle felt different this time. The air was heavy with anticipation, the silence of the woods pressing in on them from all sides. The trees loomed like dark sentinels, their branches reaching out to snatch at the friends as they passed. Emily led the way, her flashlight beamed steady as she retraced their steps from the night before. The whispers that had haunted them seemed to linger at the edges of her hearing, just beyond the reach of understanding. When they reached the clearing, the moonlight illuminated the stone circle once more, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. The air was cold, a stark contrast to the summer warmth that lingered beyond the forest's edge. Emily took a deep breath, stepping forward to approach the central altar. The others followed, their footsteps crunching softly against the forest floor. "All right," she said, turning to face her friends. "We need to figure out what's going on here. If there are spirits trapped, we have to help them." Jake nodded, raising the camera to his eye. "Let's see if we can capture anything unusual. Maybe we'll find some clues." The group began their investigation, exploring the ruins with a mix of caution and determination. As they did, the whispers began to rise again, faint and elusive, weaving through the air like a sinister lullaby. Anna shivered, rubbing her arms to ward off the chill. "I don't like this. It feels like something's watching us." Mike, who had been examining one of the stones, called out to them. "Hey, I found something." The others gathered around as he pointed to a series of carvings etched into the rock. They were crude but unmistakably human, depicting figures engaged in a ritual. "This must be what Jake was talking about," Emily said, tracing the carvings with her fingers. "The cult's rituals." Jake snapped a photo, the flash illuminating the stone briefly. "These symbols might be key to understanding what they were doing." As they continued their examination, the whispers grew louder, their intensity increasing with each passing moment. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, the feeling of being watched growing stronger. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the clearing, extinguishing their flashlights with a flicker. Darkness enveloped them, the moonlight providing little comfort against the encroaching shadows. "Stay close," Emily urged, her voice barely audible over the whispering chorus. They huddled together, their breaths visible in the frigid air. The darkness seemed alive, a tangible presence that pressed in on them from all sides. In the heart of the clearing, the central stone began to glow faintly, a soft, otherworldly light emanating from within its depths. The carvings on the altar shimmered, their lines pulsing with an eerie energy. "What's happening?" Anna asked, her voice trembling with fear. Jake stared at the glowing stone, his mind racing to make sense of the phenomenon. "It's like the stone is reacting to something, maybe to us." Emily took a step closer, the pull of the stone irresistible. As she did, the whispers crescendoed, their voices forming a cacophony that reverberated through the clearing. The friends watched in awe and terror as the stone's light intensified, casting the clearing in an unearthly glow. The whispers reached a fever pitch, the voices merging into a singular, haunting melody. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light vanished, plunging the clearing back into darkness. The whisper ceased, leaving behind a heavy silence that pressed down on the friends like a tangible weight. Emily blinked, her mind struggling to process what had just occurred. "Did we do something?" Before anyone could answer, a deep, resonant voice echoed from the shadows, cutting through the silence like a knife. "You have awakened us." The voice was ancient and powerful, filled with an authority that sent shivers down their spines. It seemed to emanate from the very air around them, enveloping them in its presence. Emily felt her heart race, fear gripping her chest like a vice. "Who are you?" the voice responded, its tone unwavering. "We are the guardians of this realm, bound to the stones by the blood of the ancients. You have disturbed our slumber." Jake exchanged a nervous glance with his friends. the gravity of their situation sinking in. They had unwittingly awakened something far beyond their understanding. "We didn't mean to disturb you," Mike said, his voice steady despite his fear. "We just wanted to understand what was happening here." The voice chuckled, a sound that resonated through the clearing like distant thunder. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing, mortal. You have set events in motion that cannot be undone." Anna swallowed hard, her mind racing to comprehend the implications of the Guardian's words. "What do you want from us?" The air grew colder, the shadows pressing in closer as the Guardian's presence loomed over them. "You have trespassed upon sacred ground. To restore the balance, a price must be paid." The friends stood frozen, the weight of the Guardian's declaration settling over them like a shroud. The realization that they had crossed a line, awakening forces beyond their control, left them speechless. "What price?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Guardian's voice echoed through the clearing, a final pronouncement that chilled them to the core. "One of you must remain." The words hung in the air, a grim ultimatum that left no room for negotiation. The friends looked at each other, the gravity of their predicament sinking in. "No," Jake said, shaking his head in defiance. "We're not leaving anyone behind." Emily nodded, her resolve unwavering. "We came here together, and we'll leave together. We'll find another way." The Guardian's laughter echoed through the clearing, a mocking sound that sent shivers down their spines. "You are brave but foolish. The choice is yours. But know that the balance must be restored." The whispers resumed, a haunting melody that wrapped around them like a suffocating embrace. The shadows pressed in closer, the forest itself seeming to close ranks around the stone circle. The friends huddled together, their minds racing to find a solution. The thought of leaving someone behind was unthinkable, yet the Guardian's ultimatum left them with few options. Emily took a deep breath, her mind racing through the possibilities. The stone circle held the key, and she was determined to unlock its secrets. "There has to be another way," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We'll find a way to appease the Guardian without sacrificing one of us." The friends nodded, united in their resolve. The Guardian's presence loomed over them, but they refused to let fear dictate their actions. With renewed determination, they examined the carvings on the stones, searching for clues hidden within the ancient symbols. The whispers continued to haunt them, but they pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. As they worked, the Guardian's presence remained a constant reminder of the stakes. The shadows shifted, the forest alive with a sense of anticipation that mirrored their own. Hours passed, the friends working tirelessly to decipher the cryptic messages etched into the stones. They pieced together fragments of an ancient ritual, a means to appease the Guardian and restore the balance. Finally, Emily stood back, her heart racing with a mix of hope and trepidation. "I think I've figured it out. There's a way to perform the ritual without leaving anyone behind." The others gathered around, their faces a mix of relief and determination. The path was fraught with danger, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With newfound purpose, they prepared to enact the ritual, drawing upon the ancient knowledge inscribed within the stones. The Guardian's presence loomed over them, a silent witness to their efforts. As they began the ritual, the air shimmered with an otherworldly energy, the stones pulsing with a light that grew brighter with each passing moment. The whispers rose to a crescendo, their haunting melody resonating through the clearing. The friends worked in unison, their voices joining in a chant that echoed through the night. The energy around them intensified, the stones glowing with an ethereal light that illuminated the clearing. The Guardian's presence grew stronger, a palpable force that pressed down on them from all sides. The whispers reached a fever pitch, their voices merging into a singular, haunting chorus. And then, with a final surge of energy, the ritual reached its climax. The stones blazed with light, casting the clearing in an unearthly glow. The whisper ceased, replaced by a profound silence that seemed to stretch into eternity. The air was charged with anticipation, the forest holding its breath as the ritual unfolded. The Guardian's voice echoed through the clearing, its tone filled with a grudging respect. "You have succeeded. The balance is restored." Relief washed over the friends, their hearts lifting as the Guardian's presence began to fade. The shadows receded, the forest returning to its natural state. Emily smiled, her heart filled with a sense of accomplishment. They had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, their bond strengthened by the trials they had endured. The friends made their way back to town, the weight of their experience lifting with each step. The forest that had once seemed so menacing now held a sense of peace, the whispers silenced by their actions. As they reached the edge of the woods, Emily turned back, casting one last glance at the stone circle hidden within the trees. The forest held its secrets, but they had uncovered one of its greatest mysteries. The whispers that had haunted them were now a distant memory, a reminder of the power of curiosity and the strength of friendship. And though they knew the forest would continue to hold its secrets, they walked away with a newfound understanding of the world beyond the ordinary. The night woods had tested them, but they had emerged stronger, united by the bonds forged in the face of the unknown. And as they left the forest behind, they carried with them the knowledge that the whispers would never again hold them in thrall. For they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, their spirits unbroken and their hearts filled with the courage of those who dared to seek the truth. Thanks for watching.